I'd like to introduce Lori McCullough, Chief Strategy Officer at Teachstone, and Sarah Haddon, Assistant Director of Quality Assurance at Teachstone. I'm going to turn it over to these two right now.
Thank you so much, Corinne, and we want to express our appreciation certainly to the National Center for Teacher Effectiveness for hosting this webinar and bringing this group together, and also for inviting us to participate. We're very pleased to be here. We're going to try to do three things in the next 20 to 30 minutes, and then spend some time listening to the discussion that's related and responding to any questions that we might be able to help with. We want to, first of all, introduce everyone to Teachstone, as well as to the class observational tool, in case people are not familiar with that, because it provides a context for how we think about rater accuracy and consistency. I will mention that during our presentation, when we use the word reliability, you mentioned it's important to be clear about our definitions. So we'll be using the word reliability quite often, and we are referring to inter-rater reliability. So you can think about that, at least coming from us, as a synonym for rater accuracy and consistency. We want to share some thinking from our perspective about the importance of reliability as a consideration in any classroom observation, whether it's our tool, the class, or some other tool. And along with that, because we really think they're inseparable, we'll have a little bit to say about validity as well. And then third, we want to describe with some level of detail the processes that we use here at Teachstone to ensure validity and reliability in the use of our observational system, which is the class. Anytime an organization is designing an observation system, it seems fairly obvious, but is also important to point out that the most important question to ask at the outset is, what is it that we intend to measure? Being very clear about that, being very focused on that as we choose or design an observational tool or a system of observational tools is critically important. And it's also critical that we ask whether or not these things that we've decided to measure matter. Our perspective is that what's worth measuring in classrooms are the things that can be clearly connected to student learning outcomes. And so we like to remind ourselves and others to attend to teaching practices that make the most difference for student learning, and to not be distracted by those that really don't matter as much, and may be distractors and even a waste of resources. So our thinking is that once these practices that matter have been identified, they drive decisions about what kind of tool or what kind of system is going to be used. And in our organization, what we've chosen to focus on are student-teacher interactions, because the evidence from the research that's been done by our colleagues here at the University of Virginia indicates very clearly that the interactions that happen between students and teachers in classrooms are a key feature of teaching and learning. The evidence is very clear that teacher-student interactions are a powerful predictor of student outcomes, and that this is true across content areas and across grade levels. So our observational tool is designed to focus on this, what we know matters. CLASS, I should mention, is an acronym for the Classroom Assessment Scoring System. It's an observational tool that's been in use for about 8 or 10 years in various iterations since the beginning, since its inception. Currently, it's one of the tools included in the Measures of Effective Teaching study funded by the Gates Foundation. And again, we're looking at the interactions among teachers and students around 3 categories, or what we call domains: emotional support in the classroom, classroom organization, and instructional support. And in a few minutes, my colleague Sarah Haddon will have a more detailed look at each one of those domains. what I want to mention now is that we know that those supports provided by teachers through their interactions contribute to students' social, developmental, and academic achievement. Data from the class tool is being used and has been used for several purposes. Probably the three main ones, though, are to drive teacher professional development, so we're able to identify which dimensions or which domains are a particular teacher's strengths or area for growth, and then design and target professional towards the things that are going to make the most difference for that teacher. Certainly monitoring both programs and individual teachers' performance and evaluating teacher performance is an appropriate application for the class tool. And then we also see data from the class tool contributing to the research space in a variety of ways. Teachstone, the organization that Sarah and I represent, was founded by two of the authors of the class, Bob Pianta and Bridget Hamry at the University of Virginia. And Teachstone exists to support quality implementation of evidence-based programs and tools. The evidence-based program that we're focused on currently is the class and the professional development programs that support it. In our work, we do several things. The main ones are listed on this slide. We provide training for observers, or what we sometimes call coders, to code teacher interactions with students in classrooms. We provide training for trainers of those observers. So our method for bringing this to scale is a train-the-trainer model. And we also provide training for coaches to target that professional development one-on-one with teachers where they need it. Our quality assurance programs, which Sarah will talk about in more detail because these are really the main focus of this webinar, include observer reliability testing, calibration, and certification. And those first two things, training and quality assurance functions, are targeted at maintaining reliability as we get programs to scale. We also design and provide professional development at varying levels of intensity. And to give just a couple of examples, at sort of the lower intensity end of that range, we have a video library that includes video clips that represent exemplars of high-quality interactions along the various dimensions of the class tool. So that might be simply used as a reference. The video library is used by our clients and by our partners in a number of ways, but it can be as simple as being a reference tool for a teacher who may want to know, for example, what the class definition of high regard for student perspectives looks like. That teacher can log on and see video examples that show exemplars of these different dimensions, all the way up to our flagship coaching program, which we call MTP, My Teaching Partner, which is a one-on-one, 10-month-long relationship between a teacher and a coach who works with that teacher on moving or improving teacher interactions with students in the specific places where that's needed to help the teacher be more effective. And then, of course, support and consultation for our partners, especially as we're bringing on more large-scale projects. We want to be sure that the elements we've built into our programs that ensure reliability are not compromised as we bring those projects to scale. The reliability in the class tool starts with understanding what we like to call the class lens. Class lens is a way of looking at student-teacher interactions and coding or scoring them as they compare to exemplars of what we know are effective interactions in these various categories. as we're training observers or coders, our purpose is to build that reliability. So any one of our observers could visit the same classroom during the same time, or could watch the same video from a classroom and would code that in exactly the same way and get the same results. And again, we'll talk in more detail about how we do that. We think that it's very important, especially as a program comes to scale in a school district or a state, that people who serve in all these different roles, teachers, coaches, observers, researchers, and administrators, whether it's the class lens or some other way of looking at the classroom, it's important that they all share a lens, so that as we're talking about high-stakes decisions surrounding teachers, we are sharing a language and sharing a conceptual base and understanding each other's perspectives. That's, we think, what reliability is about. The class lens, based on the research that we have and we're continuing to produce, coherent and consistent across age, grade, and content areas. It's one of the things that is helpful about this kind of observational tool. We can really help people through professional development and training programs understand the qualities and the elements of effective teacher-student interaction. And though there's some variance in what we're looking for across these grade levels, because students change, they grow from students, and pedagogy is different in these different levels, and so there's some variance. But the key elements of the interactions we're looking at are consistent across these age levels. So we can have a discussion about emotional support teacher behaviors or about classroom organization with teachers across a range of grade levels and all be talking the same language, which is very helpful. I'm going to turn the discussion over, the presentation over now to my colleague Sarah Haddon. Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about the way the class is organized and share a little more detail about how we assure reliability in coding.
Thanks, Lori. So as Lori mentioned, the class measures the emotional organizational support provided to students in their classrooms. When we talk about emotional support, I think it's quite intuitive, but just in case it isn't, we're really looking at what teachers do to help students develop relationships with their teachers and their peers, what they do to get students excited about coming to school and excited about learning, what they do to help students feel comfortable in the classroom, and what they do to support appropriate levels of autonomy. When we move into thinking about classroom organization, we're really thinking about what teachers are doing to help children, students regulate their behavior, to get the most out of each school day, and to be interested in learning. Then when finally moving into the domain of instruction, really thinking about what teachers do to help learn how to solve problems, to develop their. We think about teachers providing effective feedback that really helps the students. I'm sorry, I'm not very loud. So I will actually start over again, if you don't mind. I apologize. So as Lori mentioned, the class measures the emotional, organizational, and instructional support that classroom teachers provide to their students. I'm going to briefly define what the three of those mean, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Emotional support really looks at what teachers do to help students develop relationships in the classroom, those with their what teachers do to help students get excited about being at school, excited about learning, motivated to learn, and to help them feel confident in the classroom and to develop appropriate levels of autonomy. If we think about classroom organization, it's what teachers do to help behavior, what they do to help them get the most out of the school day so that that instructional time is well spent. We also think about what teachers do to help the students get interested in learning. And then moving into instructional support, what we're really thinking about is what teachers do to help students develop and use higher order thinking skills, so problem solving, analysis and reasoning, prediction, those kinds of skills that we know are so important in terms of helping children learn. Okay, I am hearing still louder. I'm putting on my best lecture voice here. The other thing we think about in terms of instructional support is the feedback that teachers use in order to deepen their knowledge. And then you'll notice here on the slide that we've got one slide that says pre-K and K3, and then the other that says upper elementary and secondary. As Lori pointed out before, we have a continuity across the age levels from the infancy up into the secondary age range. But we also know that the needs of the students are going to vary based upon their age ranges. When we look at emotional support and classroom organization, we'll see that those components, which we refer to as dimensions, positive climate, negative climate, et cetera, are dimensions. Those are the same, regardless of whether or not we're talking about a preschooler or a high schooler. How they manifest themselves will look very different. But when we get into instructional support, you can actually see at the bottom of that slide that we really look at concept development a little bit differently. So we're really probing for content analysis, content understanding. Specifically, we're also probing to make sure that that teacher is really pushing those critical analytical skills that we know our students need to be successful as they move through life. We still have the quality of feedback because no matter the age of the learner, they need more feedback about their work than just, gee, that's exactly right. We also talk about instructional dialogue and how teachers really engage students in back and forth exchanges about this information that they're learning. So that differs just a little bit. You'll also see at the younger ages, we have a dimension called language modeling, what teachers do to promote children's, and in this case, I'm talking about children, because I'm talking about the pre-K through third grade of their language development, but we do not do that when we get to the upper ages. So in order to ensure that people use the class reliably, what we've done is taken the information I just showed you on the previous slide and really parsed it out a lot more. Because if I said to everybody on this call, let's all go into a classroom and look for positive climate, we might all see something different. And so we've really worked in developing the tools to spell these things out in much more depth. And so I'm going to give you an example here using content understanding from the upper elementary and secondary age levels of the class. So our vocabulary here is that instructional support is our domain. Our dimension is content understanding. The way we define content understanding in the class is that it refers to both the depth of lesson content and the approaches used to help students comprehend this framework, key ideas, and procedures in an academic discipline. At a high level, this refers to interactions among the teachers and students that lead to an integrated understanding of facts, skills, concepts, and principles. So we've moved from just a title, content understanding, to a definition. We then move into what we call indicators, which again are narrowing down what it is that we're specifically looking for. Here we're talking about depth of understanding, communication of essential concepts and procedures, background knowledge and misconceptions, and then transmission of content knowledge and procedures. Then, and again, we can all probably go in, and if I said, let's all look at depth of understanding, we still, as educators, might look for something different. So what the class does then is have the behavioral markers, and I'm guessing that this is not showing up very large on your screen, so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. So under depth of understanding, we would talk about making sure that the teacher emphasizes the meaningful relationship among facts, skills, and concepts and real-world connections. under communications with concepts and procedures, we might have the teacher, we would ask actually at a high level, that the teacher identifies essential characteristics and gives multiple varied examples. So those are the kinds of things that we do in training people on the class to ensure that they understand the tool deeply and can use it reliably. So the class, as Lori mentioned, is a research-based tool. We have actually over 15 years of research behind the class. The class is currently being used in every state in our country and in multiple settings across, actually around the world at this point in time. And to be able to confidently send our tool out, we need to be able to say that it's valid, that it's measuring what we want it to measure, and in this case, it is the effective teacher interaction that our research shows leads to improved outcomes for students, and also that it's reliable so that we can train people to see the same thing, so that when I go out, and I go all around the country with the class, when I go out and I work with somebody, if we go into a classroom, I know that we're looking at the same thing. Or if I'm reading a research study and someone has used the class and they say this classroom had mid-level content understanding, in my mind I can picture what they see because I know that they've been trained on reliability on this tool. So, why is this important? Well, I think I've pretty much just stated the obvious, but one of the things that I can tell you, and any of you who have either been through a class training or had the opportunity to pick up the class manual and look at our technical appendix, you'll see that we do have space, content, construct, and predictive validity that support the use of the class tool. One of the things that we say a lot as kind of a buzz line is that students who attend classrooms that are rated more highly on the class have better social and academic outcomes. So some of the things we see are that students have better learning gains both on standardized tests of achievement, such as a Woodcock-Johnson, for example, but also on state standard testing. We also know that it does predict to student engagement, motivation, and social competence. And finally, we also have some nice studies of our professional development that have clearly demonstrated that when we work with teachers to improve their interactions, that their class scores go up, and then concomitantly we see improvement in student achievement. So, and of course, validity is important in any tool, and in what we're talking about today is that tool that measure behaviors that matter. Again, because we're thinking about developing systems and we're going to be putting money and resources, both human resources and financial resources, into the system, we want to make sure that it is sensitive to the professional development. When we think about implementing the class at scale, we really want to make sure that we have consistency in our ratings so that we have confidence in those results. This is an example from the preschool world, that at the pre-K level, the Office of Head Start has adopted the class as a part of their monitoring system. They're making very critical decisions about programs based on class scores, so we definitely need to make sure that we've developed a tool that allows people to become reliable. In some of our studies that we're doing here and our PD efforts here, we're also matching professional development to teachers' class scores, so that if we are looking at the data and seeing that either a teacher, a program, a center, a school is having difficulty with instructional support, then we're really going to want to focus our efforts in ramping up teachers' ability to provide strong instructional support. So this is just another way of looking at it, but we really want to think about the fact that we truly have to have confidence in what we're using. resources we use to develop a tool, to adopt a tool, to train people to use a tool. It's really critical that we use something that's going to align with what we want to be moving forward. Yes, Lori.
Hold on a second. Maybe try. We're going to pause here for just a second to see if we can get Sarah's sound a little better.
Hi, I will try picking up the phone. It's interesting because I truly am projecting about as loudly as I can. Yeah, and so we're looking at we're trying to look at the bars. Much better. I am so sorry. No, we don't have time for me to go back, so I can't at this point go back. But the idea is that we have to have confidence in whatever tool we use because we are, as systems, putting a lot of resources, both human and financial, into what it is we're doing. And that, if we pick a tool that does not have reliability behind it, then any of the data we collect and analyze isn't going to be useful for us. And we all know that flawed data leads to flawed decisions. So that reliability really helps with alignment in terms of the resources we select, the data we collect and analyze, how we use that information to provide feedback to our teaching staff, and in terms of the professional development we provide, which again will lead to those improved teacher-child outcomes. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the process that we use to ensure reliability. Using the class tool really is like learning a new language, and some of the terms I used earlier, if you could hear me, were terms like domains, dimensions, indicators, and behavioral markers. It's a new vocabulary, and what we ask people to look at may also be somewhat different. I've been training people on the class for about 6 years, and when I walk into a group and I see that they have gray hair, as do I often say this may be a little harder for you because you already have a lens for what you want to look for in classrooms. So we really have to work with people to help them learn that new language, and that requires that ongoing practice and training. So I'm going to talk through our process very quickly, and this is literally just the 5 steps, and then I'll give you a little bit more detail. First, we have the observation training that Lori mentioned. After observation training, people need to take a reliability test. If they pass that reliability test, they are certified. We recommend that people calibrate using the tool, and then at the end of a year, they have annual recertification. Okay. So our observation training is a 2-day face-to-face training for our observers. During that training, our trainers will explain all of the different dimensions of the class. We'll explain that we have a 7-point rating system, and we'll work systematically with the trainees to help them see short exemplars of for each dimension, but then also to help them move through actually coding a classroom with either 10 or 12 dimensions depending upon the age level. There are more dimensions as we move up age levels. And at the end of the training, go ahead, Lori. She's clicking for me. As we go through after the training, there is a reliability test. This test is online. Trainees can take it at their leisure. And what they have to do is code 5 15 to 20-minute segments reliably, again using our 7-point scale. They have 3 attempts to pass. When they do pass, people whose codes match our master codes, which means that they're within one of the master code on our 7-point dimension, our 7-point scale, are granted certification to use the tool, and they can then go out and use that tool for a year. But as I mentioned before, we really encourage that people calibrate. All of us who use different kinds of observational systems know that people can drift. So we have developed a calibration system that allows people to go online quarterly and code another video and then get automated feedback from us so they can see where they're staying true to the tool and see where they may have areas where they need to do some refreshers. So that's the way our calibration system works. And then at the end of the year, people need to recertify. We, because our testing is online, we have web-based supports that people can use to help them get ready for their recertification. In truth, some people will take an additional training to refresh themselves if they haven't been using the tool a lot in the previous year. And the recertification test works just like the initial certification test where they go online and reliably code 5 videos. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Lori. Thank you.
And I'm taking the phone receiver from Sarah. So we know that her experience as a preschool researcher, her background is largely with young children. She's got that lovely, soft, nice, gentle voice. I've been a K-12 administrator, so I may blow your ears off if I'm holding this phone, but I'll try to not yell. As we finish here, we want to just mention that as you're looking at ways to observe teacher effectiveness and finding a system for doing that well and with high quality, there are some other things to consider besides just validity and reliability, and we would be remiss in not at least mentioning them. And so I'll do that very quickly because I think we're at our question and answer time. One is standardization. Standardization is about protocols and monitoring. There need to be very specific ways of doing things, and those protocols need to be monitored to be sure that people are sticking to them. There are lots of ways that people can drift around, not just in their codes, but in their processes and their procedures. Second consideration is feasibility. Is it doable? Is it realistic given the time and resources available, especially as you take it to scale, a system to scale? Third is sensitivity to change. The question here is, can your instrument be used to measure change? For example, when a teacher's effectiveness improves as a result of professional development, does the system you're using show that improvement? And then fourth, links to improvement. Are there guidelines? I call this the so what factor. So we have this data from an observation system. Are these data useful to us in guiding or driving professional development? And I think it's time for us to finish here, so we want to be sure that you have some contact information for us. We're happy to answer questions now, and I'm going to attempt to put the phone back on speaker so that Sarah and I can both hear it. So I think, Corinne, are you going to?
Yes, I was going to say thank you very much, Lori and Sarah. I'm going to try and moderate the question and answer period. We have about 18 people on the phone right now, so if you all look at your screens, there's a participant list in your upper left-hand corner, and just below that list there's this little hand with a green arrow. And if I click on that, you hear that ping noise, and number 1 shows up under my name. Nina just raised her hand as well. If anyone has a question, you can ping that, and we'll call on you. And I think if it gets we actually do want interaction, so if you do have a follow-up question, you can jump up with a hand raise as well. So if you want to continue on. If we have any questions for Lori and Sarah about the class instrument, also about how this might apply as you think about your own systems. I know we have some states on the phone who are developing their own tools or default rubrics, things that you're thinking about. Okay, I see Katie Core has a question.
Yes, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Question about whether the class tool is being used at the state level in any states.
Yes, this is Sarah, and the answer is yes. At this point, it is primarily in the preschool world. The preschool tool has been around longer, so we just are at this point doing a little bit more work there. But the Department of Early Care and Learning in the state of Georgia is using it at the state level. We're on our second year of working with them, and the
You guys are going to need to pick up the phone again, I think, and listen with your heads together.
Okay. It's so interesting because I could be sitting on the phone. That's how close I am. So what I had said was that we do have some states that are using it, and they are at this point predominantly pre-K because the pre-K tool has been around longer. The Department of Early Care and Learning in the state of Georgia, their state-funded pre-K program, is using the class for professional development, and we're in our second year of working with them. The state of California, we've recently signed a contract with them for their state-funded pre-K programs. So we're working with them. There's a new statewide initiative in Hawaii, which is going to be both pre-K and K-3. And the class is one of New York State Education Department's approved teacher practice rubrics for K-12. Lori, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just, since I am the K-12 person, I want to just ditto what Sarah said, but also say that we are one of the 7, or it may not be 7 anymore, so don't quote me on that number. We're one of the approved teacher practice rubrics for K-12 systems in New York State. They are in the process now of getting together and figuring out which of the rubrics on that list they are going to use. So we are expecting to see some projects at scale in K-12 there very soon. We're part of the P20 initiative in Hawaii, and so there's pretty widespread use in Hawaii of the K-3 age level of our tool. And I'm going to put the phone back down so we can hear the next question.
I don't see any hands raised, but I actually had a question about the training and whether or not there were plans to create online training or how you do kind of large-scale training. I know some of your work has been with Head Start and you've done thousands of trainings. How do you scale up? Are there plans to scale up to like a web format or anything like that?
This is Sarah. I did pick up the phone this time, and that is a good question. We have actually, as part of the Gates Foundation study, developed an upper elementary and a secondary online training program. And at this point, we're not releasing it for broader release simply because we want to look at the data and see how effective it is. If it's effective, then I think we probably will move to more online venues for delivering our trainings. Lori's writing me a note. The other thing that we do is, and Lori mentioned this earlier, a train the trainer model. At this point where to help people build capacity, we go out and we train organizations so that they can then train the multitudes. And to be honest, at this point we have far more affiliate trainers, is what we call people, than we have our own trainers. And in fact, they deliver far more trainings, I think 8 or 9 times as many trainings as we do through Teachstone. So that's one of the things we're doing to help scale up.
I don't see any hands raised. If anyone, I do see. Lisa Laughlin, please.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Lori and Sarah. It's good to hear from you. My name is Lisa Laughlin. I'm with the Reform Support Network and the American Institutes for Research. Some of the questions that I hear from states are just around whether a sort of platform like this is amenable to being used in a state where they have developed their own rubric. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the flexibility within the work that you do, if a state could work just by using your library or just taking some of the pieces of it, or if it could be somehow contextualized for the rubric that a particular state might have developed.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa. This is Laurie, and I can respond to that, I think, in a couple of ways. One is as it regards our video library. We do make that available to states or any other clients who are using another kind of system or another kind of tool, but they need access to video that they can use to practice coding and build reliability among their own observers. So that is
actually separate from our work with the class, but we do provide access to our video library on a subscription basis, and we do have some clients who are using it to help them kind of develop their own tools. That having been said, I would also say that we're pretty picky here about these issues of reliability and validity, specifically this reliability issue that we've been talking about. And as Sarah gave the example of the online training, we don't release products until we're certain that that our assumptions about their effectiveness are correct. And so we're working all around the class framework right now. And so I think these our system for maintaining reliability isn't the best word I can think of is it isn't plug and play. It's developed for the class, it's developed around the class, and we know it works with the class. And then a corollary to that, and I think another thing to consider, is that the class has some flexibility built into it because it's content-free. Because we're looking at teacher-student interactions, it can be used in any classroom at any grade level. So one of the things that we've been talking to lots of school districts about is building a system that includes the class tool as one component. I know that a lot of school divisions right now are looking at building evaluation systems that include perhaps a growth or a value added measure, an observational measure, and then perhaps another third measure. And many of the school divisions that we've been talking to recently are using the class as that observational tool, and then perhaps a homegrown or a tool that's specific to their situation as that third component. And I hope that answers your question. Please come back at me with more specifics on any part of that if it doesn't quite answer your question.
Oh, I think it does. Yeah, and I think the more particulars that we can have around that would be really interesting for those states that do have their own model. I think particularly the certification piece and the calibration, all of your expertise around that could be really useful.
Great. I don't see another question on the board, and I do have one last question. And I've been talking with mainly with districts about how they plan to implement new teacher evaluation systems. It seems like most of the burden as far as doing the observations is going to fall to school principals. And I was wondering if either of you could speak to any advice or worries about having a single person responsible for doing all the observations, or if that is the case, any advice on how to assure reliability and validity in that situation.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about that, because that's, for one thing, something I've been talking to some principals about too, and also I've spent a lot of years as a principal, and so I understand the challenges associated with that. I think that although I would certainly be the first person to acknowledge that a principal in a school building needs to be in those classrooms observing and needs to have in his or her head a real clear picture of that teacher's performance based on their own observations. I would also say that I think because of the high levels of reliability that are built in to the class tool, it enables that principal to call on other people to do some of those observations. For example, we have a school division that we're working with in Virginia where they're using recently retired teachers to train as class observers. And so I'm picking these numbers a little bit out of the air, but if, for example, a teacher is going to be observed 3 times during the year, 2 of those, or maybe just the summative in the spring, might be by the principal, and another class observer might supplement that with additional observations. That works only because of the assurance of reliability. And we have a data system available through Teachstone where observers can input their class codes and then provide the principal with a report describing that observation. So the principal still gets all of the data and is able to have conversation with the teacher about that. And I'm going to hand the phone to Sarah because I think she has something to add about this.
So I was just going to add that there is definitely a recognition that this is a time-intensive effort to expect administrators to go out and develop and observe, yet another observation within the classrooms. And so our colleagues at the Center for Advanced Study of Teaching and Learning over at the university have a grant to develop a short form based on the class that is specifically for administrators. Clearly it's not ready yet, but it is something that we're interested in thinking about to help facilitate this process.
Okay, any last questions? Anyone on the phone? Lori or Sarah, anything you want to comment on before you log off?
No, I think we're good. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, the agenda that you received does have a summary of Teachstone. It has bios for Lori and Sarah and also their contact information. So if something comes up later on that you want to contact them about, all that information is there and will be posted on our website.